Wall Street Wrap-Up is supported by Bamboolas, featuring live music and coming soon, tapas and wine upstairs. Bamboolas, the heartbeat of Frenchman Street.
This week on Wall Street Wrap-Up, the S&P 500 leaves a technical bear market, the longest since 1948. So, are we now in a bull market? Or is this a FOMO, a fear of missing out? Does this bull market have legs? No bull? Has Elon Musk and Tesla just cornered the market on EV charging stations? And the Federal Reserve will be meeting next week to see how much more you're going to be paying on everything from your credit card bills to financing your house. What will they do? We'll be talking with the former chief economist at the International Trade Commission and professor emeritus of economics at the University of Maryland, Peter Morici. Will they need to raise rates even higher to get back to a 2% inflation? We'll ask Peter. I'm Andre Laborde. We've got these stories and more. So sit back and relax. Let's have 30 minutes together. It's Friday, and it's time for Wall Street Wrap-Up. Hi, and welcome to Wall Street Wrap-Up. I'm Andre Laborde. It's Friday, June the 9th. Well, you might not have known it, but the S&P and markets were in an official bear market. And now the bears are waving the white flag of surrender. But is it? Next week, the CPI will be announced, and in addition, in May's inflation numbers being reported, the Federal Reserve meets to see if they should raise interest rates another 25 basis points or hold tight. So with these events coming, will the bull market continue? That's next week. But how did our money do this week? The Dow Jones turned positive for the week, and top sectors of the day were technology, discretionary, and healthcare. And the sector laggards for the day were materials, real estate, and utilities. The S&P 500 posted their fourth straight positive week. NASDAQ posted the longest weekly win streak since November of 2019. And this week, the Dow Jones closed today, and they were up 0.6% for the week. The S&P 500, they closed today up almost 0.4% for the week. And the NASDAQ, they closed today up just under 1.5% for the week. So with the S&P 500 now out of the longest bear market since 1948, what were retail investors actually buying for the week? Well, the top stock was Tesla, with just over $1.2 billion in sales in just the last 5 days alone. And Tesla, by the way, is up over 15% for the week, and the stock is up 100% for the year. Now, that was followed by Apple with $385 million in retail purchases. And with AI and a strong quarterly report last week, NVIDIA was in third place, with investors buying $326 million more of that stock. So does this information cause a recession, or does it indicate if a recession is coming? Well, Peter Morici, he is former chief economist at the U.S. International Trade Commission. He's also professor emeritus at University of Maryland, and he's a 7-time winner at the Market Watch's Best Forecast Award. And best of all, we're happy to have him tonight. Hi, Peter. Welcome to Wall Street Wrap-Up.
Well, so nice to be with you. Louisiana is such a great place.
Hey, Peter, this is a great week for us to be together because, last week we had the job numbers that came out last week. And this week coming up, we're going to be having the Federal Reserve meet to whether or not to decide, are they going to raise interest rates? Are they going to keep it the way they are? Or might be even lowering? And, even more so, right before they meet, the CPI numbers are going to be released. Are you happy with the trajectory that what the Federal Reserve is doing? Do you think they're on the right path?
Well, I think they're on the right path, but the angle of the ascent is not steep enough. We got up to inflation 7-8%, and they've raised interest rates to 5%. When Paul Volcker was facing inflation of maybe 10 or 11%, he raised interest rates all the way to 18%. My feeling is they haven't done enough to slow the economy down. You say, well, gee, why do you want to slow the economy down? Well, we see how high interest rates are taxing financial markets now. I mean, although we've had a bit of a rally lately, we're really not where we were a year or two ago. And it's a matter of, when do you take your medicine? Do you take it all at once and have a quick, hard recession and then move forward? Or do you go through kind of like a slow water torture, which has happened in the 70s? In the 70s, they did a lot of pausing. So, they bring inflation down a little bit and they pause and go up a little more and back and forth and so on and so forth. And they eventually ended up with double-digit inflation that way. Now, I'm not saying we're going to 10 or 12%, but in the kind of environment we're in, with the sorts of changes that are taking place in the economy, it's ludicrous to think that you can get down to 2% inflation on the basis of what they have done so far.
Are we in a strong economy right now, or are we in a weak economy? And I ask that because last week we had job numbers out that came out up about 338,000. But to what you're saying, where our unemployment rate also went up. So that was what the Federal Reserve wanted, but the high job numbers was not really what they wanted.
It's a survey of the population where they ask you, are you looking for work? Are you employed? Think questions like that. And it kind of fluctuates a lot from month to month.
Yeah.
The jobs number is a very different survey. There they call employers up the week of the 12th and say, how many people do you pay payroll tax on? Because you have to pay payroll tax on every employee. It is very hard to fudge that number. I mean, you know how many employees you got, you know how much money you're sending to the IRS every month. And so, that's a much firmer number. So don't pay too much attention to the unemployment rate. If it goes from 3% to 7%, pay attention. But if it jumps a few tenths of a percentage point month to month, it's not so much to get a headache about. As for the record, this very high number of jobs created this late in the cycle, remember, we're coming out of the pandemic when people couldn't find the workers they want. In fact, a lot of the people that are being laid off in the tech sector are quickly being scarfed up in other sectors of the economy where they couldn't find, people for their IT departments. And employment historically is a lagging indicator. And that is, it tends to go down after the economy slows, not before. Now, is the economy slowing? Yeah, a bit. So eventually, we're kind of expecting some kind of recession. And that's one of the great things about being an economist. You're never alone at a church supper. Somebody always walks over and asks you, is the stock market going up, or is there going to be a recession, depending on whether they're feeling good or feeling bad. If I could just stand on a corner and count the number of people that ask me one question or the other, I can tell you a lot about people's expectations of the economy. Is the stock market going up? We're going to have a recession. These days, a lot of people are asking me, we're going to have a recession. From the point of view of an investor, what really matters is the economy is going to slow down. But does it really matter whether we have an official recession, if it's shallow, or we creep along at a very low level just below a snake's belly? What matters to investors is that the environment is going to be this way and that way, kind of, up a bit, down a bit from the point of view of the stock market, for several quarters to go until at least towards the end of next year.
Well, it sounds like
that's what matters.
Well, it sounds like, Peter, that you're wanting the Federal Reserve, not knowing if they will, but that they should raise rates even higher. But that will then slow down the economy. But because of an election year of 2024, they won't want to be doing that. And whether they say it or not, the Federal Reserve is a political body.
Well, the most political people are those that don't look political. I mean, you look at Jay Powell and you think he's an advocate of, say, the Episcopal Church or something, or of the Little Sisters of the Poor. He looks so establishment and so perfect.
It's also, Peter, it's amazing. It's amazing. He didn't start raising rates until after he was nominated for his next term.
Well, that's been pointed out. Yeah. He's very, very political. And if Donald Trump is the nominee, you can rest assured that the entire Washington establishment is not going to want Donald around. And so the Fed's no exception. There's that aspect of things, that they are political. And so my feeling is that he is kind of stuffing the Federal Reserve with people like that. For example, Joe Cook. Let's take Joe Cook. Joe Cook, as a professor, wanted to get the editor of a leading economics journal fired because he was against defund the police. Now, economics journals don't get involved in that kind of stuff. That was a personal view. But her view, a view different than his, was get him fired. It is an article in the left these days that inflation is good for working people that a hot job market is better than a bad job market. And so you can count on Jill Cook to vote to lean against raising interest rates. Goldsby out of the University of Chicago has just pronounced that an immaculate deflation is indeed possible. Now, you got to remember, he comes to us out of the University of Chicago, which is known for monetarism. I'm surprised they haven't run him out. The next thing you know, that economics department is going to start offering courses in faith healing and divining the future of the stock market from the stars and palmistry. I had never heard such. Well, I can't. This is a family show, so I won't use the word, but it's got 4 letters and it describes horse droppings and so forth. My feeling is you've never heard stuff like that from economists before. Well, maybe we could have it. The economists that Joe Biden have sent over there will do almost anything to keep the Fed from raising interest rates. It's that simple.
It sounds also, Peter, that he's got more doves on the Federal Reserve than he has, as they call them, the hawks. So that want to raise. So it sounds.
It's not just a matter of being a dove. Mm-hmm. It's not just a matter of being a dove. You know, doves' minds can be changed. Mm-hmm. What you've got are ideologues and political loyalists.
Well, and also
the Fed has.
The CPI numbers are going to come out right before the meeting.
Corrupted.
Yeah, but the CPI numbers are coming out right before the meeting. So do you think that depending
on... That's going to look pretty favorable. That's going to look, because the price of gasoline's down right now in this month. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a May figure. And in the month of May, gasoline prices were down. Now, they're starting to go up again because of what the Saudis did, or they're about to go up. But in the month of May, they were low. So he's going to get help from gas prices on the headline number. On the year over year, they'll still be over 4%. But you've got to remember, and Powell is dead right on this, and that is you have to focus on the service sector, less apartment houses and, rentals, and less energy. Because that's things like restaurants, rent-a-cars, baseball games, opera tickets, stuff like that. That stuff, dry cleaners, that stuff is extraordinarily sensitive to what's going on in the labor market. Mm-hmm. And that's been running at a pretty heavy clip. And that's an indication of expectations and the future of inflation across the economy. That's going to be running pretty hot, but they'll find a way to ignore that and pause. Now, I want to come back to this ideology in the White House about a hot job market being good for working folk. Joe Biden's been with us a while now, like about 2 years plus. Mm-hmm. Over the last 9 quarters, that's the Biden presidency, real wages adjusted for inflation were down 7 of those quarters. They were flat in 1, which means that Uncle Joe, when it comes to raising the standard of living of working Americans, is 1 for 9.
Well, wages have been rising, but not keeping up with that of inflation. How long do you think?
That's what I mean.
So if Jay Powell, let's say he's never made any bones that he's never hidden the fact that they want a 2% inflation rate. How long do you think, at the rate they're going now, and with those that are on the Federal Reserve, how long do you think it'll take to get to that 2% inflation rate?
I was asked that question the other day, and so I looked up my life expectancy. And so
you better eat your vegetables.
It's close, because I'm 75 and my life expectancy is less than 12 years. By the way, I don't believe those tables any more than I believe Goldsby about immaculate, whatever. I'm in good shape. I was a cyclist, I'm in good shape. But, according to my life expectancy, it's a kind of a toss-up. Because after all, if Biden gets elected and they keep doing the things they're doing with the federal budget, which requires them really to print money to keep the place going. I mean, we're getting over the edge on that thing in terms of the size of the debt. We're going to be over 100% in a year or two.
That's a good point, Peter.
Joe, it's going to take the next guy some real time to get this down. It's really going to be booted to the next Federal Reserve chairman.
Well, Peter, that's a good point, because they just last week they made the deal with the debt ceiling, but now there's still going to be deficit spending. And
hold on a second. Deal with the debt ceiling. We've got a deficit that's humongous, and for 2023, the deal lowers the deficit by about $4 billion.
The GAO, the Government Accounting Office, came out with a report. And by the way, all all congressmen get this. In fact, viewers can get this as well too. That they said that there's, and this is what the CBO and the Government Accounting Office, the GAO, said there is no way of the sustaining of the type of spending we're doing, what the economy can grow to be able to match our interest rates will be so far over our GDP that it's going to be coming. And I haven't even gotten to Medicare
Okay, look
and
at it this
Social
way.
Security yet.
I don't want to get too wonky here, but once your debt is more than 100% of GDP, then if your nominal interest rate is equal to, the rate of growth plus the rate of inflation, all right, that you're paying on your debt, then your interest is going to grow more rapidly than your economy. If your economy nominally, if your economy is growing at 5% and the interest on the debt is more than 5%, then you're going to start to spin out of control. And then I'd suggest that the best books written on that subject are either in Greek or Italian. Italian is an easier language to learn for an English speaker. And since we could have an Italian American president, I suggest that you start learning Italian because they've written all the books. Their national debt is 145% of GDP.
And also people who have read history about the Weimar Republic.
And in the next recession, they're going to be in the soup because of that. You're really like by the end of the next decade, we're going to have a debt that's up. By the end of the next 10 years, we're going to have a national debt that's pushing 200% of GDP.
Well, if that money,
hold on, if the economy's growing at 5% nominally, 2% real, 3% for inflation, you're really in the soup because you're going to be paying, interest on the national debt of like 10%. And so you're going to be not a dog chasing its tail. You're going to be a dog that chased its tail to exhaustion and collapse. The only saving grace in all this is as in debt as the United States of America is, the Chinese government's even more in debt. So it's the question of which damn racehorse can make it around the track without collapsing.
I hope our printing press continues to keep printing money because that's the only other way. That if we do go into a slowdown of the economy and a recession, that means a slowing of the GDP. That means that we're going to stumble, that the interest rate continues to accelerate, but the economy is not accelerating to keep pace with inflation. So that's where we're going to have a problem.
You're going to have a problem in that your debt service is growing faster than your economy. So with each passing year, the percentage of your GDP that you have to borrow gets larger and larger. And therefore, your creditors abroad are going to become more and more reluctant to lend you the money. Now, both the United States and China are in the same boat. In China, most of their debt is internally owned, as it is here, we're going to both have to run our printing presses. So we're probably looking at a period where major governments of the world have to repudiate debt, which is easier for the Chinese to do because a lot of their debt is the provincial governments. It's not the federal government. It's easy to say, well, the provinces repudiate, but Beijing is still good behind the yuan. Whereas here, it's really the federal government, and that's a very, very dangerous thing. The real question is, can you get to 200% of GDP without repudiating your debt or just going into a Weimar Republic situation? I don't know. It's an area where we've never been. Economies that have done that before have collapsed. Pre-fascist Germany is the classic example, but they don't have the reserve currency. The other thing is also, can we hold on to the status as a reserve currency? Everybody says, well, people will start holding the yuan. You got to be crazy to think the yuan's any good. You just got to be nuts. I mean, it's a repressive state that needs the military to keep down an entire Western province. One of the things to remember here is we keep thinking it's up to governments whether the dollar is the dollar. Whether it's the reason the dollar is so important is that international business chooses to do business in dollars. Now, the existence of the SWIFT system is important, but don't think for a moment that an enterprising guy can't replace that. But I at some point see a basket of currencies overtaking the dollar if we do not get this debt in trail.
I understand. Well, what about the birth rate? I mean, we're talking about. They said that the birth rate in the United States is going down. In fact, they said it's gone down 2% in 2019 since 2019, right before COVID. Well, so they're trying to keep pace with what we had, but with AI, artificial intelligence, and with technology, do we really need as many? But the government needs it because they need the U.S. dollars to be coming in with Social Security. Will that have a problem coming up in the foreseeable future?
That's a problem, but it's a problem in every advanced industrialized country. In fact, the problem is worse in Japan, and it's worse in China.
Mm-hmm.
China's population has already started to decline. Now we have immigration, whereas the Chinese and the Japanese have a little bit. The Chinese have virtually none.
To get back to where you were talking before, to get inflation to where they want it to be, what do you think interest rates are going to have to go up to? They're going to have to raise them to.
Well, if I had been chairman, let me put it this way: if I had been chairman of the Federal Reserve, and not to make jokes, right now you'd be looking at 10% interest rates.
Really? You're talking about the Paul Volcker days?
Yeah. You'd be looking at 10% interest rates, 7% unemployment. People calling me the worst SOB on the planet. Okay.
But as they call Paul Volcker, he had to have bodyguards.
Mm-hmm. They'd be basically bodyguards Italians can find. We know them. No, but to be serious, you can't get locked up for being anti-woke on yourself. Okay,
right.
So. You can't get locked up for that. You can make jokes about, about the good folks in Louisiana if you like. In any case, people would be calling me the worst thinker on earth. But after 6 months, the inflation would be gone, and then we could return to normal. But this way, we're going to go through a very long period where we torture over these issues. The other thing is, no matter what the Federal Reserve does, even with 10%, if we don't get responsible people proposing budgets in the White House, I mean, remember, the budget that he proposed that will take us to almost 200% of GDP debt over a decade did not include a Social Security fix. And we know that at the end of the decade that we're in, right, over the next 10 years, they're going to run out of money. And it didn't even address that. And that's something very, very important to address. It's going to be very expensive the longer we wait. And he's basically booting that to the next president or the president after that. So that, if Donald Trump gets reelected, gets elected again, you can count on that not getting fixed. Yeah. You can just count on it. I mean, it's just not going to get done. And it's going to be very tough for a first-term president to do, because basically to fix that, you're going to have to do something about when people start work, sending so many kids to college as opposed to just going to work, apprenticeship program, go to work at 20, and the retirement age, which has got to go up. If you don't do those things, there's no way out of the box.
Peter, I'll tell you what, that's a perfect segue into our next show. I hope you come back. I had a lot of fun.
I enjoyed this greatly with you, and I say hello again to all the people in your part of the country. I'm delighted to have had a chance to visit with them.
Thank you, Peter. Well, hey, if you've got a question, maybe a comment about the show, we'd love to hear from you. Make it concise, make it pithy, and write us and notice the new email address at andre@benecapital.com. So let's take a look at the markets heading into next week. It's going to be a big one. But first, what superhero first appeared in DC Comics on this day today in 1938? Well, we've got the answer, and it's coming up. Well, what superhero first appeared in DC Comics on this day in 1938? Superman. Well, this week, the S&P 500 closed just short of 4,300, and it was significant in that it ended a bear market, which was the longest for the S&P, not seen since 1948. So according to Dow Jones, when the S&P 500 exits a bear market, the average returns in 1 month are just almost at 2%. And it's up almost 8% in 6 months. And it's up over 9% after 1 year. Well, we'll see. Let's have a wrap up on Wall Street. Has Tesla and Elon Musk just cornered the market on EV charging stations? This week, GM has agreed that GM electric vehicles will be able to charge up at Tesla charging stations using an adapter. But that's not even the bigger deal. Starting in 2025, GM and Ford will be installing the Tesla-style charging point in their EV cars. More companies will then follow. And CNN continues to try and pick up the pieces, and this week fires Chris Licht as the CEO of the company. This week, a scathing article in The Atlantic was published called Inside the Meltdown at CNN, quoting many at CNN are upset over Licht's decision to give Donald Trump a town hall meeting on May the 10th, and Don Lemon's firings and other decisions as well. And a survey this week from CNBC of millionaire investors as to how they're positioning their portfolios for the remainder of the year has 34% of them keeping more money in cash, 28% of them buying fixed income, such as corporate or government bonds. And with the recent bank failures of Silicon Valley Bank and others, how are the wealthier connected about more bank failures? They're worried. Well, 67% of those surveyed found that they're not concerned at all or agnostic on possible future bank failures, while only 6% have moved cash deposits out of their accounts. Martha Stewart weighed in this week on the work-from-home employees that have enjoyed since the COVID lockdowns and said by not coming into the office, America will go down the drain if people don't return to the office. She also said countries like France are stupid for having August off. And the CEO of Salesforce, Mark Benioff, is taking a different tactic. They're asking their employees to please come into the office between the dates needed, and they will donate money to the charity of your choice. Axios is reporting that Tucker Carlson, appearing on Twitter this week, received 90 million views, much more than ever at one time on Fox News, is threatening to be sued by Fox over breach of contract. And according to Carlson's lawyers, any lawsuit would be against his legal rights of free speech. They took him off the air, but he is still employed by Fox. Now, it's been reported that Fox News offered Carlson an additional $25 million if he does not go on any other media, and Carlson refused. Well, back in focus is Ab InBev with Anheuser-Busch, and Bud Light has lost its crown as America's best-selling beer. That's according to data analytics firm Circana. Sales of Bud Light fell 23% in May compared to last year. Well, the boycott of the beer is showing little signs of slowing down. Now that gives me a great chance to let you know that coming up in a couple of weeks, right here on Wall Street Wrap-Up, we'll be talking with the former president and head of sales and marketing of Anheuser-Busch, Anson Frierichs, right here. Anson will be here to discuss a couple of weeks from now just what was going on. And that's a wrap-up on Wall Street Wrap-Up. So next week, the Federal Reserve meets to possibly raise interest rates and new inflation numbers come in for May. So next week, we'll be talking with David Balin. David is the Chief Investment Officer and Head of Global Investments at Citibank. David oversees AUM, assets under management of $53 billion. And that's our show for this Friday, June 9th. Our thanks so much to Peter Marisi for being our guest this evening. Always, we appreciate you for allowing us into your homes tonight. Have a fun weekend ahead with the ones you love. I'll see you next week. And remember, if it's Friday, it's Wall Street Wrap-Up. I'm Andre Laborde. Remember, money never sleeps. Good night.
Wall Street Wrap-Up is supported by Bamboolas, featuring live music and coming soon, tapas and wine upstairs. Bamboolas, the heartbeat of Frenchman Street.